Okay, I was born and raised in Hettinger, and I moved to that farm when I got married.
And then have you always raised crops and livestock, or did you have sheep or cattle?
Well, mostly the cows and the crops, but we raised sheep when the kids needed a project and things like that, but just bum lambs and that sort of thing.
Okay, not too intensive then.
Depending on.
Yeah, my mom, she has sheep, and it's her project that keeps her busy in the wintertime. Not that she doesn't already have enough on her plate, it feels like sometimes.
Yeah.
But, so you said you're born and raised in Hettinger, and then you came back here. I'm sure was it overwhelming when you first came back to farm and ranch?
Well, I was raised on a farm and ranch, so that's all I ever really knew. There was aspects of it that were very overwhelming, but not every bit of it.
Right. Would you have any advice for a young producer that's coming back as you reflect back on those early years?
Well, I think you have to love our way of life to do it. You can't expect schedules. You just kind of have to roll with it, have a plan A, B, C, D, E, and F for each day. And you're not going to have vacations just when you feel like it. At least that's not the way we rolled anyway.
No, that makes sense. I will say that's one thing I struggle with the most being an extension agent, is it's very scheduled and do, and I'm not very good at staying on time. I'm overly optimistic about what I can get done, right? And then I'll meet up with my parents to do an AI project or work cows, and in any other situation, I would be half an hour late. But really, I end up being like 15 minutes early because we're all running on farm time. It's really nice. But what do you think the biggest change you've seen in agriculture over the years?
Well, is it like in the farming? Are you referring to just farming or just the whole thing? I suppose, okay, let me start again. I would say technology is the biggest change I've seen in my lifetime, and how it's changed our way of farming, even cattle and everything. The technology has made it a lot different than it was when I started.
Is there a specific gadget or gizmo that's been invented that you're like, I'm so grateful that they came up with a better way and easier way to do this?
Well, of course, the computer, I would say, would be the biggest thing. And of course, that's included in everything we do or use nowadays.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how Ross used Google's documents, right, for all his calving records and his pasture rotations, and so whoever is out there can just log on and punch in that information, and there's not just one place where everything is being recorded.
Exactly, and I enjoy that too, because if I'm active or not active, I can still look at the records and see what's going on.
Right. I'm sure you still remember a lot of the cows, and you can say,
yeah.
692. Yep, she's got a nice calf again this year. This doesn't surprise me.
Well, I still do the main cattle records. It seems like it gets to a certain point and then somebody has to finish it up or start the new year. And so far, nobody else has taken that job, so I still haven't.
Yeah, my dad has passed that job on to me as well. And this last year, I kind of took my sweet time doing it, and he's threatened to take it back, but I don't think he ever actually will take it back. How about you talked about how you raised cattle and everything over the years? Do you have a favorite calving memory?
I think that calving has always been my favorite time of the year. I really, really enjoy it. There's no thrill like finding that calf, or especially a set of twins that are up and doing good. Working with Ross and Marissa has been a real blessing because we work together without a lot of talking or a lot of interaction. We just know what the other person is going to do or what is expected out of the other person. And because I don't know if I can explain how it is for me to work with Ross and then Ross's daughter, and our connection is a real gift.
Yeah, I think that's really special, and it's really nice. It makes working cows a lot more enjoyable, right? Because you just kind of know what each other's doing, and you can just kind of flow through it, and it makes the whole process, I think, much more relaxing. I know when my dad and I sort cows, we don't really say a whole lot, and we just kind of
Just works out.
Now, when my brother and I sort cows, that's a little bit of a different. We're still figuring out how to flow together. How about on the flip side, switching to the crop side of things? Do you have a favorite harvest story or a planting story?
I have a favorite harvest story. I was driving the combine and Marissa was making her maiden run with the grain cart. And that was about the most exciting thing I've ever experienced. And to this day, whether it's my opinion or Ross's, she is the best grain cart driver we've ever worked with.
Well, that's really incredible and everything. I know when you're training new people and to take on a job, sometimes there's a learning curve, and I can think of a couple learning curves I had to go through and everything, but she just kind of picked it up.
It's just a natural, you know, it's, some of us have certain gifts and some of us have others.
And I think, and correct me if you think differently, but I think sometimes if you just kind of take a step back and observe the situation, you can really, you don't have to be told how to do X, Y, and Z if you just kind of pay attention to what's going on in your surroundings. And
that's the secret to everything, is pay attention, yes.
And now, you know, we talked about changes that you've seen, and I know technology has been one really big change over the years. Can you think of like a specific change that has been really positive for the agricultural community?
Well, like in the farming end of it, going from summer fallowing where we were depleting everything in our soils to now where we're continuous cropping and using cover crops and different things to build the soil back up. And from what I understand, that came about by the improvements in chemicals and fertilizer, and now we're doing the precision farming where we're, you know, treating the different soils the way they need to be treated to produce the most.
When I think about the improvements we've made, especially as far as no-till farming practices, my dad, he tells this story about there's this picture, and it's a settler, and he's out, you know, breaking the sod, and there's this Native American that comes up and picks up this like piece of sod, and the caption for the picture says like something along the lines of upside down, like they're turning it upside down and it should be right side up and everything. And so I think I just enjoy seeing how we've been able, we all make mistakes, and we just, you learn from it and you better your practices, and sometimes that means you kind of go back, right? You think one way is the way to go and you head down that path, and then you find out, well, actually we're going to loop around, and maybe some of those older practices were there for a reason. How about thinking about, it's kind of gross outside right now, right? What would be one of the worst storms that you've lived through?
December 14th and 15th, 1964.
Okay.
It was a beautiful morning. There was huge snowflakes falling down and just picture perfect. We had to come into town because there was school land leasing, and you either go that day or you don't. So we went into town, everything seemed fine, and then gradually the wind started coming up, and we had loaded, the pickup was loaded with feed, and I remember buying a 50-pound bag of potatoes that got thrown on top of that load. And by the time we started heading home, highway was okay. We got to the Cyrus, turned north, and we could barely see the road. So we found our way home by him driving and me telling him which mailbox we went by. And that's how we got home. And then I don't remember all the details of what happened that day, but I think he must have gone out and done some things, but the next morning he tried to go out and he couldn't. And luckily he found his way back to the house. And at that time I never realized how dangerous it was or what a position we were in. The following morning when things calmed down, he went out and there was at least one milk cow dead in the stanchion. The few calves we had in the yard were still there. Not so sure what shape they were in, but all our cattle were gone. And because of the storm and the hard drifts and all that, they just drifted away with the storm. And we had borrowed money to buy those cows, but later that next spring we borrowed more money and bought more cows, started again. And then there too, we'd only lived on the place 3 years at that time. So we didn't have trees, we didn't have protection. It was a new homestead that had a house and a barn when we first moved there. By the time the storm came, we did have a few corrals and a few other things, but no trees to speak of. So I guess if I had to say what I was most proud of my farm is the trees.
Now that would have been, a young couple and everything, and we're just kind of getting started and everything, and then you go out and take out another loan. What gave you the determination to just keep plugging through?
I don't know if I could put my finger on that. We wanted to succeed and didn't feel like if we were going to stay there and be successful, we had to have more cattle to have more income to pay our loans.
Yeah, it's the amount of grit. I think producers still today have a lot of grit, but I think it just was a different kind of grit back then with all the extra hurdles you had to overcome.
I think my family is very independent, especially us women, because my grandmother on my mom's side came out here and homesteaded on her own, and I think we've been told more than once we're too independent for our own good. So.
Well, play on your strengths, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, kind of as we wrap things up, do you have a favorite family tradition?
Yes, I do. As a child, I went with my mom hunting crocuses, and I always totally enjoyed it, so I passed that on to my children, my granddaughters, and now I've even got a great-grandson that's gone crocus hunting with me.
So how do you know that? Do you go out multiple times, or is that?
Yep, you have to go until they're there, and when they're there, it's a miracle. It's a precious, precious moment.
I really like that. I think crocuses are so beautiful, and when they start poking out, it's just like, oh.
It's just like a miracle all its own. It's a gift from God.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with us and everything. Was it